Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the NASW-New York C.A.R.E.S Community Engagement Initiative for the first event of the School Social Work Series. My name is Angelique Imani Rodriguez. I am the Manager of Membership Engagement and Special Programs with the NASW-New York chapter. Registration for the remaining events of the NASW-New York C.A.R.E.S School Social Work Series is still open, a week-long series of events about school social work, including a CE opportunity. If you're looking for more CE workshops, we also have a very robust CE schedule, and there's more on the horizon for the chapter, I promise you that. We hope you opted to add your email to our email list so you can start receiving communications from the chapter, including our weekly email digest that's sent every Wednesday that provides the most current information from the chapter. Post-event, you'll receive an email that will share all of this information about what's upcoming at the chapter, as well as any resources or information provided by tonight's presenter. Please remember that by registering for any NASW New York events, you agree to abide by the NASW New York anti-harassment policy, the link of which I will drop in the chat for you all shortly. Before we begin tonight's event, we want to take a moment to acknowledge that NASW New York recently experienced a Zoom bombing incident during our free virtual C.A.R.E.S programming. We are actively communicating with our national office to implement stronger preventative and responsive protocols, as these type of disruptions have unfortunately been on the rise across virtual platforms across the nation. While we are taking every precaution, we want to prepare you that should an incident occur today, it may involve hateful or emotionally distressing content. Please know that we are ready to immediately handle an incident should that occur tonight. Our mission remains to provide free and accessible NASW New York C.A.R.E.S community engagement programming to support New York social workers across the state with content that matters to them. However, sorry about that. However, if these disruptions continue to escalate, the chapter may need to reconsider the structure of these offerings, including the possibility of instituting attendance fees and so forth to better protect the integrity of these events. We appreciate your understanding and ongoing support of NASW New York chapter programming. Once again, thank you all for joining us this evening. If you have any questions about this event or any other community engagement events at the NASW New York chapter, I'll drop my email for you in the chat shortly as well. Without further ado, let me introduce you to our wonderful, illustrious presenter for the evening, Martha Schultz. Martha, whenever you are ready.
Sure. Thank you so much. Well, welcome everybody. Happy Monday evening. My name is Martha Schultz. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm also a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I'm a school social worker. I will let you know it is Monday. There is no school tomorrow, which means my house is filled with teenage boys playing video games. So if you hear random things, you hear someone say shush, it's one of them. Or we also have a puppy. So at any point in time, chaos may ensue. I create a judgment-free space, so hopefully he will not judge me for my teenage sons or my dog or my husband. Actually, you can judge me for that one. I won't mind too much. I'm also the NASW Northeast Division Director, which I've been for about 5 years. So if you're in my region, that's Albany, capital region of New York State, all the way up to basically the Canadian border and also bordering Vermont. So today I've been asked to talk about navigating school social work opportunities. So I talk a lot with students, with other people in my community when they're interested in school social work about how do we get into it? What do I need to look out for? How to review a contract? So when we were creating this series, this is kind of like the first like info dump to help you if you're interested in school social work. Maybe you are a school social worker and you want to look for a different position. Maybe you're a student and you just want to get information about a different aspect and career in social work. If there's any questions that come up that maybe I don't answer, feel free to let us know in the chat and I can save time at the end to go over it. I'm a fast talker and I love to talk. So at any point you're like, whoa, Martha, like give us a breather, raise your hand, judgment free. I don't mind. And if you're brave enough to unmute, kudos to you. So these are our topics that we're going to go over tonight. We're going to start a lot about looking at ourselves and who we are as professionals, who we are as human beings, what about us that we think would fit in school social work, and then how to navigate and find school social work positions, and then finding the right one for you. So assessing yourself, social work is all about use of self, right? It's an intervention, it's a practice that is what makes us, I think, unique and different from other professions. When it comes to school social work positions, I would always start with this. What is your level of experience? What kind of supervision do you need? Are you at LMSW and you need to and you want to get your seat? That might be a big question that you need to have answered when you're looking for jobs. Are you someone that has had independent practice? Maybe you worked in an outpatient clinic prior and you feel very confident in your assessment skills, your crisis skills, and you like working in a team, but could also work independently? That would be beneficial for you to know. Are you fresh out of school and you're like, I want to work in a school. It's my like first job. It's my dream job. Then that might really shape what school social work positions you're going to look at and interview for. Also, there's a difference between school-based clinicians and a school social worker. So maybe you want to work outpatient, but also get the experience of working in a school. Then you might not necessarily need to be a school social worker. You should be looking at positions for outpatient behavioral health that have satellite clinics in schools. So across New York State, the Office of Mental Health will license offices as satellite office within school buildings. So what that means is you're not an employee of the school, you're an employee of the outpatient behavioral health clinic, but you see kids, families in a school setting. There's pros and cons to that kind of position. Quickly, it sometimes is tough when you're working for a clinic in a school because school staff don't understand that. It may be hard to sustain boundaries with school staff in terms of confidentiality. And it's also how do you balance a caseload if kids don't show up to school? Who are your network and team members in a school? But also, how is your clinic supporting you when you're outside of the clinic walls? So again, I get a lot of questions about what the difference is and which one might be for you. Depending on supervision needs, depending on independent practice needs, you might want to be a behavioral health clinician inside a school if that's something that might suit you as an individual. Community connection. So if you're interested in school social work, the first thing I would ask you is, are you new to your community? Do you want to work in that community? Do you have other things in your life that may make it hard to work in that community? Do you have children that go to that school district? Or is your whole neighborhood go to that school district? Those may be questions you ask yourself and your comfort level. How would you handle if your kid it gets invited to a birthday party for students that you know all of them because you work with them in school? Is that something that would bother you? Maybe it won't bother you, but those are questions you want to start asking yourself. If it's a neighboring school district, how long is the travel? Is this going to be worth it? How much do you know about the community the school is in? Each district is very unique, especially across New York State. The community and culture really defines the school, and also it's important to know how the community views the school. Is this a community that is pro-school? Is this a community that is against the school? Are there leadership or other political issues that may be driving those thoughts and feelings about the school? That would be something I'd be asking because you would want to know, oh, I really want to work for, this school, but man, the community really is against them. That would be a red flag to you that, okay, I acknowledge that. I'm going to work hard to help bridge that communication and partner with the community. Or that may be something where like, that sounds like a lot more stress than I'm willing to like manage right now. And I'd rather work for a district or a school that has a better relationship with the community. How would you know? Maybe you don't know that community very well. Well, first of all districts across New York State have to post their board minutes. Which if you're a nosy person is very interesting. But it could also, and I'll mention at the end, also give you insight into who might have positions opening, like for long-term leave, and also who's retiring. So that's another little snippet. But every district across New York State posts their board minutes. They either post it on their website or they post on what's called board docs, and you can go on and read their meeting minutes, which may be very enlightening to you. Do you notice a lot of turnover? Do you notice a lot of like budgeting and financial issues? Do you see in the public forum that things are pretty heated? Do they put their board minutes on YouTube and you can even watch the board meetings? That may give you, again, some insider information on what is the community viewpoint? What are the community needs? Maybe something really, that could be something you're really interested in if you love like community work and you want to work to help with the school and partner with the community or strengthen what already is there. Facebook groups. There is nothing more that people like to do in their free time than comment on Facebook. Especially the parents that we have right now, they're the Facebook generation. They're not posting on Instagram, maybe a TikTok or two, but they spend a lot of time sharing their opinion to anybody who will read and listen on Facebook. may be helpful for you to see. How does the, public respond to the pictures or the posts on the district's website and their Facebook? And how are people tagging the school on their posts? So do some of the teachers have great posts? They're like, wow, this community really loves like their third grade teachers. Or wow, this school's Facebook post is really robust. Like they have great, like a media person, and they're congratulating and like encouraging staff, and the comments on the photos are all positive. Or maybe they're giving you some insight in like, ooh, this might be something to navigate. Maybe this is a red flag for my own personal boundaries and what I'm looking for in work. But Facebook could be a great, if you have some sleuthing or some time, a great way to see and kind of get the community's perspective. Also, and I'll post them at the end, New York State, for a lot of districts, has done some shape assessments and other needs assessments within the community. If you have accepted a job or you're interested in a school social work job in a specific county or specific area, I would be looking on the OMH, Office of Mental Health New York State website to see what that needs assessment's like. What are the demographics of the community that you're going to be serving? What are their top needs? Maybe you may not directly be like working on them, but that's information that's going to help you understand the people that you're serving. A lot of schools are the hub of the community. That is where they get most of the services, especially for our younger kiddos, especially early intervention. But knowing what barriers people may have to coming to school, knowing what the demographic is and the people that are coming to you, where they're come from, would be a great way to build that foundation to partner with them. Your professional identity. So who you are as a school social worker is also a persona. Because schools are the hubs of community, you will be known in the community for whoever else. I think you can see, I'll go this way, but like Miss Martha is my persona. I live in upstate New York, my tri-county area, you say Miss Martha, they know who you're talking about. I've seen kids from little kids that have now graduated, and they tell their friends, I'm known in my communities as Miss Martha. And part of that is very intentional, because if I came into a rural community that had never had a school social worker before, that assumed that social workers were CPS caseworkers that removed their kids, I had to do a lot of work to bridge the gap, partner, destigmatize what social work is. And now, like, and I also workaholic, so I work everywhere. Everywhere I go, people are like, oh, Miss Martha's here. I work in our local emergency room. Last night I saw someone, as soon as I came in, they're like, they could not wait to see Miss Martha, which is an odd thing for someone in crisis in the emergency room, but the persona is what helps build the relationship. It also is a great way for you to set boundaries with yourself, especially if you live in a rural or small community and maybe your school that you work for borders into your like personal life. It's a great way to set some boundaries with the people in your life, and also the school staff. Schools, when you're looking at the positions, who are you reporting to? Are you the first school social worker they ever had would be my first question. If they've had another school social worker, what did that look like? Who did they report to? A lot of times school social workers get kind of in this, they're not sure if you're admin or not admin. So that would be a question I would be asking, if you're leadership or not. If you are leadership or administration, one, that's a different pay difference, and two, that's a different union contract, which we'll talk about later. So I'd be asking, who's my boss? Is my boss a building leader like a principal? Is my boss a director of special programs like a CSE chair? Is my boss a superintendent? And knowing with schools, leadership changes. People leave jobs, they retire, someone new. You want to make sure who you're reporting to is documented, because one new principal could have a whole different experience from past schools on what school social work is. So you want to make sure that everybody knows you report to the superintendent. Everybody knows you report to CSE chair. You want to make sure you know who your boss is, which we'll talk about later, also defines your roles and responsibilities. School counseling, school psychology, school social work, and outside clinician in a school, all different roles and responsibilities. I would first understand yourself what those differences are, Because if you do not understand, when people ask you, you're not going to be able to articulate correctly and they're going to be confused. I always say like school social work and mental health is almost a different language in the school settings. A lot of teachers, leadership, administration, they speak education. School social workers, school counselors, school psychologists, they speak education. A school social worker, you need to speak education and also mental health and community. So you need to learn 3 languages to be able to work cohesively throughout each department. However, do not expect building leaders, administration, school psychologists, school counselors, teachers to understand school social work. I would presume they don't. That's been my experience for over a decade. They don't know. They have good intention. They have good thoughts. They think we're all like a caseworker. They think we're this, but it's your job to politely, but also advocate for yourself and share with them what is a school social worker. And part of that is also defining by yourself what the difference between school counseling and school psychology is. Once you define it yourself, it's also making sure your leadership and your administration know the difference as well. That is very important. So if you're interviewing for a job and they're like using terms in an interview like social work, casework, counseling, that's when I would be stopping to be like, whoa, I've noticed a lot of interchanging phrases. I just want to make sure that I'm applying for a school social work position. And how do you guys define school social work? And we'll talk a little bit more about roles and responsibilities, but I would be asking at an interview, how does your school social worker work with school psychologists and school counselors, and what makes them different? What services do they provide that school psychologist or school counselor cannot? A lot of times this is defined by the school. Every school social work job is defined by the school you work for. So you could interview for job A and have one idea, interview for job B, they have a different total need for you. They have defined you totally differently. So those are the questions you need to be asking, because you may want to be a school social worker, but a school social worker at school A looks a lot different than a school B. Either one may be fine to you, but you want to know ahead of time. Contracts and collaboration. So a lot of people are interested in school social work partly too because of the schedule. A school schedule can be really nice. Holidays off, breaks off, you get done in a reasonable hour, but you also need to read the fine print on your contract. Is your contract, and you can ask to see last year's contract, because usually they're 3 years, so you can always ask to see, should be somewhere online too, FYI. But you want to be seeing, where do they group their school social workers? Are they other related service providers? Are they with the school psychologists and maybe other service like PT, OT, speech? Where are they putting them in the contract? You want to make sure you're in the teacher contract, not the CSEA or like a secretary administrative aid contract. Different benefits, different retirement plan, different schedule. Are you a 12-month employee? 11-month employee? A 10-month employee? Where does it say? If it doesn't say in your contract and you have a preference, I would advise you get it in writing what your job is, because just like they do with teachers, if it's not written down in your contract, they can change it at any point. They could say to you, oh, like, you're a 10-month, but it's actually not written down, so we need you for 11 months to cover ESY or something this summer. So making sure your contract outlines what your month obligation is. You can also then choose your paycheck to be divided if you have the summer off. That's something you can do with their department. Who are the union reps for your contract? Are they teachers? Are they a school nurse? Are any of them counselors or related service providers? Because your union rep represents you. But if your union rep's been a teacher for 20 years, my experience is great people don't understand social work. So say there's a question or you need support, you want to make sure your union rep understands what your role and responsibilities are, because that also may be the union problem, right? That they need to advocate on your behalf for. What are your extra roles and responsibilities? We'll talk about the defined what you do every day, but does your contract also say that you need to run a club? I have a school psychologist friend for district. He didn't realize that the difference between this new job and his old job was not only his day a little bit longer, but he has to facilitate a club all year long after school, past his contractual hours. That's fine print you need to be checking. Is that fine for you? You're like, hell yeah, like I'm going to do a gaming club, or I'm doing D&D, or we're doing hiking, or we're doing origami. Go for it. That's great. But not knowing and then having to come up with something and then stay later after school could be a frustration for you. Or if you have childcare or you're a caregiver or you have other responsibilities, or like me and you're workaholic, that might be a problem because you got to go to your next job. Also, make sure if you have multiple jobs that there's no clause in the contract saying like no competitive clause. I've never seen one. I do know for some like OT and speech, I have seen them put clause in for that because they don't want to lose their OT and speech. But you want to make sure the contract doesn't have any language over what you could do outside of school. Contracts will also mention social media, especially now more than ever. I would understand what their restrictions are. I'm sure you're all lovely people. We make mistakes. I'd hate for you to post something on your Facebook, Instagram, TikTok that you thought was fine, and somebody, because there'll always be somebody, rats you out and gets you in trouble. It's one thing if we do things with intent to break the rules, but to get in trouble for like not knowing is different. So look at where your contract says in terms of social media posting. I mean, TikTok's big right now. I'm not, my dog's on TikTok, so I'm on Dog Talk, really. But I also get sent like a lot of things, so like teachers recording the day, before and after school. I see school social workers, a day in the life. That may not fly for the district that you're in. If that is a revenue source for you, like you make money on social media, I would be then at interviews saying like, hey, I run a successful social media account. I document what my day looks like. I would be having those conversations ahead of time and having things in writing so that you don't get yourself in trouble or lose income after the fact. And I'm just peeking at the chat real quick. Okay. Career progression. So again, you want to make sure your social work job, school social work, is on tenure track. Districts will also define how long tenure is. Is it 3 years? Is it 4 years? Are you already tenured at another school and joining a new district? Is there a clause for you to have a 1 year and then you're tenured? That would be important questions I'd be asking. Are you actually a contractual position? Are you a shared position? Are they using grant money or outside behavioral health service money to pay for you? How are they paying for you in general? Is there a grant that they're using? Because that would be a huge question I'd be asking. Where are the funds for my position coming from? If they got, like we saw a couple years ago, a lot of districts got COVID money and they did, buy certain equipment, X, Y, and Z, and hire people. Well, when the COVID money ran out, they fired those people. So that would be a question is like, where am I being funded from? How do I know that this is a position that's not grant funded? Also, just in general, across the board, like rural schools are getting hit with budget cuts. So I think that would also be a question I would ask at an interview is like, because I read your, board meeting minutes. I looked on the Facebook and I could see like these budget cuts or, school tax have raised and there's some tension in the communities. How can you guarantee I'm going to have this job in the next 2 years? What is the plan to sustain school social work services in this district, in this building? I'm just checking the chat. Oh, actually, I'll go back. Professional advancement. Are you somebody that's interested in then becoming a leadership work administration? Do you need to go back to school to get your admin cert, whether it be building leader or it could be district leader? Are you interested in special education services and being the director of special programs? Again, that would be the question I'd be asking at interviews is where do you see a progression of a school social worker? Is there a team that I can supervise? Do you have team leads, group leads, building leads, or is it just you're a school social worker and you work silo, you work by yourself and that's it? So those would be questions if you're somebody who looks to supervise or looks to lead. I'd be asking, do they take students? Are they interested in having graduate level students? Could you supervise? Is this a setting that they would be appropriate? Again, I'd be asking at their interview. So role versus responsibility. So again, every school social work position is going to look completely different. In rural upstate New York, when I'm a school social worker, historically, I've been the first and the only for entire district. My friend works in Schenectady. She has a team of 40 social workers. Totally different. Neither one is better or worse. It's all based on the needs and what the district defines. Are you a district school social worker? Are you expected to travel between buildings? Are you a school social worker that's tied to a specific program? Are you in an 811, a 1211? Are you assigned to pre-K? Are you assigned to kindergarten? Are those permanent or do they have the ability to also change? So if you apply for a pre-K school social work position and you're at the interview and they say, well, depending on needs, we may switch you, I would then ask, switch me to what? Like, am I just the elementary school social worker then? Or could I be moving to a middle school, high school, or to a different like special program room or service room? I would be asking those questions. Are any of the services I'm providing off-site? Do I need to be doing home visits? Am I out in the community? Am I switching between buildings? What is my schedule? When do I have lunch? Is it a scheduled lunch or is it a lunch on my own time that I'd have to figure out? What time do I have to be there in the morning? What time do I have to leave? Am I doing general counseling? Am I doing IEP counseling? Am I doing progress notes? How am I documenting my time? Am I tier 1, 2, or 3? This could be different for any job you apply for. If you're someone who's like, I want to be pushing into classrooms, working on social emotional learning, then making sure at interviews, those are the questions you're asking. Or if you're somebody who wants to do, I just want to do IEP and 504 counseling, then I'd be asking those questions. Do you want a balance between pushing in and pulling out? So you want individual counseling, but also pushing in and doing classroom instruction. Across New York State, social emotional learning is an aspect that, because of the mental health law, that education that they have to be providing. It also, the graduation requirements in New York State are shifting to portrait of a graduate. SEL, social emotional learning components are in there. What that means is historically, a lot of districts have been using school social workers to push into classrooms to fulfill their SEL requirements. That may be fine for you. That's not really intended what SEL is supposed to look like, but that might be what you want to do. Have you ever led a classroom instruction? Because classroom instruction is different than group counseling. So then I would be making sure, if that's new to you, what opportunities do they have to train you? Is there someone who's already doing it that you can watch? What are the classroom push-ins structured like? What are your like room for flexibility and creativity? Those would be more questions I'd be asking. And it's tough because I think a lot of times the school social work positions are going to usually have a posting that's very general, right? Like individual and group counseling, they may say, or in crisis. But unless you ask these specific questions, you really may not know what the job is you signed up for. Point blank. I have a friend who signed up, who got a school social work job, thought it was one thing, even toured the building, had all this, shows up her first day, and they're like, actually, you're tied to the autism, like special education room, and you're in charge of these 15 students, and blah, 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 blah. And she was dumbfounded. She's like, I didn't even occur to me that they were going to put me here because of how the interview went, the tour went. But then she said, but I didn't ask any of these questions. I just assumed I was going to be in this building and doing what I wanted to do. But assuming and knowing and asking the information could lead you to a very different picture, a picture you may be happy with, but you don't know unless you ask. Crisis response. Does your district and or building have a crisis team? Who is on that crisis team? Is it you? Is it somebody else? How do they define a crisis? Crisis in school looks a lot different than crisis in the community or in an emergency room. Their threshold may be totally different than your personal or professional threshold. So I would be really asking questions around that, getting a look at what their crisis protocol is, what documentation they have, what are their referral resources, and what is your responsibility. Also, school social workers, and when you're having the discussion about roles and responsibilities, are they hoping you're going to be providing PD to the district? Are they hoping you're going to be doing ongoing trainings? I would be asking that. I had a friend who, new job, going great. Somehow, though, every conference day, he ends up presenting. Every single one. And to them, they thought that would just be what his job also entails. But creating district-wide presentations is very time consuming. He's great at it, but he did not realize that was going to be part of his job because he didn't ask that question. So what kind of presentations are you going to be obligated to facilitate? Or is it a module that they already have and you're just providing the information? Is it a new presentation, new information that they want you to give? Are they going to send you away to go get trained and then come back and train the trainer model where you have to train other like teaching educational staff, teaching staff, support staff? That would be a great question. Are you compensated for this extra, travel, extra everything? Or is that just assumed that's part of your responsibility? And if you're facilitating presentations and trainings on conference day, on superintendent's day, are you just getting paid your regular rate, or are they also paying you as a presenter? Because that will be a question I'll be asking too. So school social work also looks different for what kind of school. Are you looking at a public school, private school, charter school, or BOCES? Really, if you don't know the difference between those, that's totally okay. What it comes down to is the funding for those schools, their ideologies, and also the services they provide. So public is obviously taxpayer dollars. Anyone can go to a public school. I would say the community has a lot of involvement in and giving opinions about what kind of education and what services are provided in the school. Private, they get their paid for by tuition expenses. A lot of private schools might also be religiously affiliated. That would be something I'd be looking into and what that uniquely looks like for your position. BOCES is the Board of Cooperative Education, meaning that school districts in regions pay for services within BOCES. So it's not necessarily taxpayer. It is in the sense that people are paying school taxes and they're using that money for BOCES, but BOCES might be career and tech educational, alternative ed, special education programs, work experience programs. So you have a lot of options because a lot of places need school social work. So maybe I've been a BOCES school social worker across 2 campuses, serving 9 school districts. And I've also been a school social worker in a K through 12 school district. Totally different jobs. Even though the district I was originally working in was a district within that BOCES, totally different jobs. Career technical education students we're learning trades. A lot of them have never ever talk to anybody about their emotions and feelings. And despite having like alternative education programs where a lot of those kids have history of behavioral disturbances, have access services, I saw more career tech education students than I ever saw of alt ed. Because I was in my position available to them and they had no barriers to accessing mental health care because I was in the building. That's why I was there. I saw a ton of them. So that's always fun and very interesting. Again, are you district? Are you regional if you're with the BOCES? Like I had to travel to 2 different campuses over in their hour, because I live rural, an hour between. So if you sign up for a BOCES job, I'd be assessing, okay, which building am I attached to? Do I need to travel? If say one of the component districts needs a service, am I then the person responsible to go to that district? Or am I organizing other people to go to that district? So I'd be asking those questions as well. Tour your potential district or building. I mean, if you can't picture yourself there, that's like a big red flag, right? I mean, we laugh because if you are a social worker, then like we've all had dungeon offices, we've had shared offices, we've had no offices. So if the space they're going to provide for you, one, if they don't have one, I'd be asking like, what do you envision like I would need in this space and what would be beneficial? 2, if they say, oh, we keep having to move your like the school social work office, that would be another red flag to me. But also if they give you a tiny closet, are you okay with that? Does it not matter to you? Are you a problem solver and you'll figure it out? Or are you maybe like sick of dungeon offices and maybe would like a window and you're at that point in your career where you're like, no, I'm going to wait for the window. And that's okay too. But unless you tour, you'll never know. Is your office next to something in the building? Is it next to the gym, which might be loud? Is it next to the cafeteria, which may be smelly? Is it next or in the like principal main office? How are students having confidentiality? What are they doing to do that? How are they separating discipline from school social work service? That would be my question if my office was in like the main central office related to like building principal or district leader. So where is the office? Where are they going to put you? Can you see yourself there? Are your office mates nice? Are you also in like a suite with the school counselor and school psychologist? That would just be questions I would be asking. So now that you kind of like have thought about, wow, that's like a lot of questions, right? I think if you start asking yourself some of these questions, you may be able to rule out ahead of time certain districts or certain school social work positions even before you apply. And then you should have by now a cheat sheet of things you're going to be asking the interview committee, because I know you guys are going to get the interviews, what are you going to be asking them? Which also, if this is like not an interviewing like professional development thing, but the more questions you ask, the better you look anyways. And then you can also like leverage to get more pay, depending on your teacher's contract. Now you've answered some questions. Now you need to start looking for positions. You know, like I do not want to be at a BOCES because I do not want to be driving to 9 component districts. I don't even want to deal with that. I'm not interested in high school or special education to that degree. I want to be preschool. I want to be providing IEP counseling across the district. I want to be in middle school. I want to be just doing push-in for SEL. So now you know ahead of time to be reaching out and asking the questions even before you have the interview, what the school social work position they're posting for. And let me just see, I'm going to see the next one. So where do schools post positions? There's something called OLAS where you can search school social work positions. I will say sometimes they're late to post on OLAS. A lot of schools post on Facebook. Employment opportunities, they use Facebook as free advertisement. So you're already stalking their Facebook account because I told you to. So you may see, oh, sorry, don't know what that is. Emergency alert. I'm so upstate, we have a weather alert. And it's not gonna stop, sorry. Okay, I have freezing rain coming my way. I hope you don't. I'll have it for you. So you've been stalking their Facebook page, so you'll know now that they're gonna be like posting for employment opportunities. So you can see it right away. You can then click the link, you can do the application, whatever they may need for you. OLAS, like I said, I see a lot of districts post later. They're not as quick to post on OLAS, but they eventually will. And that's like a just for schools database for open positions. Networking and like if you are in the community you want to work within, I would definitely be attending community events, school board meetings if you even want to for public forum, getting to know people and making yourself known to the community so that they know you're interested in working there. I'm just gonna check the chat.
We have a couple questions. I'm keeping track of them for you. We can once we get to the Q&A, we can address
Perfect.
them. I'm just responding to folks as they come in.
Perfect. I see the light. I got excited. So again, opportunities. New York State, I'd be watching where the money is. If you see legislation pass, if you see grants, people usually post, especially online or in the paper, like, oh, so-and-so school district got $50,000 or so-and-so. If you're okay with grant positions, that may be an opening for you for school social work. I again would be in interviews though, if you're someone who doesn't want a grant position and talking about legislation and school budget cuts, making sure when you're spending this time to interview that they're going to have a plan to sustain your position if there is budget cuts. Is school social work on the block, point blank? Do they need a school social worker? Is this an extra position? Is this just because they had an influx of kindergartners and they want a kindergarten school social worker, but they're not sure we're going to replace you the next year? So I'd be making sure to have those questions brought up at the interview to make sure that your position is going to be sustained. So that's where I'm at. I know you said there's some questions, so I'm happy to answer them. I can go back to if I am a fast
Yes.
talker. So
so the first question we have is from Mindy, and it's a question around the job market. We kind of touch base on where you can find particular jobs, school social work positions. But when Mindy's a little concerned about the New York City metropolitan area, before they make a career transition, they wanted to know if there is a demand for skills and for their skills and services. Mindy, would you like to elaborate a little bit to see if maybe that information was applied for you?
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. Yes, because my background has been with a different client population, but I am very interested in pursuing opportunities in school social work. we're going through a change in the administration now with Mamdani coming into office. So I do have concerns about what the job market will be like for school social workers in New York City going forward.
So I do know, so we're trying to pass in New York State that there has to be a school social worker in every building in every district in New York State. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm hopeful that that will pass. I do think that the post-COVID, there's a lot of research and a lot of media on mental health crisis. And as someone who's worked in schools for a long time, the reality is that the demographic that we're serving in public schools especially is different. Behavioral health needs are higher. Teachers and educational staff do not have the skill set. They're not bad people. Teachers are amazing, but they do not have the skill set or the desire to want to manage that. So I think there will always be a need. What I do see, though, is depending on funding, a lot of districts making contracts with outside agencies to provide the service. But once you do that, you're not a school social worker, you're a school-based clinician. So I do see more of that just based on funding, because if they're sharing the cost, it's a little bit more secure, right? And if you are in a community where they've just raised the school tax, they the community may have their own opinion about new positions. So the school, to cover their like butts, might be making contracts so it doesn't look like they're spending a ton of money. Because people have opinions about what schools are spending money on, good or bad, they're allowed their opinion.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for your question, Mindy. We have a question, a comment from Nayoka, and I just want to acknowledge the comment because I believe this insight was gained from your presentation. Initially, I was only applying to positions with NYC Department of Education. Now I think I should consider both private and charter schools. I'm transitioning from working in child protection, and I'm finding it really hard to get in. Just a reminder, the rest of the series, tomorrow's event is about applying as a social worker, school social worker. We have a policy event coming up. We talk about licensure in this series. So make sure you're joining us for the rest of those as well. Moving on to Nelson's question, which roles and work settings are recognized as qualifying experience for the DOE salary scale? Does this include only school-based social work positions, or would behavioral health or BOCES roles located in school settings also count?
That's a very good question. I'm going to be honest, I'm not quite sure. But I think that would be a question you could also ask districts. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, I'm just no schools. Even though it may be posted online and say one thing from the state, schools will have their different way that they translate that information. So that would be something I'd be bringing up and asking.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that question, Nelson. We have a question from Marie. Is there a different license needed for school social worker, or is it just a certificate in the license?
So great question. So in New York State currently, you have to be at least an LMSW. Once you have your LMSW, the first thing you do, which you cannot do until you actually are employed as a school social worker, and I think we're going to have a session tomorrow that talks about this explicitly, is you then go through New York State Teach to apply for your school social work certificate, which then the certificate is, you have to have a certain amount of hours. It might be 2,000 hours, it may be 3,000 until you're permanently certified. New York State Teach is the same online system as the New York State DMV. So what I tell people is, you probably have a username and login. You probably don't remember it, but you can forget your password and get it because it's the same for the DMV. Teach is where also educational staff has their teaching certificates. So what makes school social work a little confusing is you have your New York State Office of Professions license. Then you have your New York State Teach certificate of school social work. You cannot be a school social worker unless you have your certificate. You cannot apply to be a school social worker unless you are employed as a school social worker. It's a form you get hired, you fill out the form. Each district has their own Teach liaison, because every teacher needs to have their stuff in Teach so that they have one. It's usually through BOCES, it's regional. There's a form that you fill out with your start date that the school then sends on your behalf to Teach to endorse you. And that's how they map your hours for your temporary until you can be permanent. So it's not something that you can really do ahead of time, because you need to be with a school to start the process. but you
Excellent.
can't be an LMHC. You need to have a licensed master social worker.
Thank you so much for the answer. Thank you for the question, Marie. Monifa, I believe that kind of answers your question, but feel free to unmute and clarify. I'm currently in LMSW who specialize in clinical. Do I need additional certification in order to transition to school social work? I think we covered that. Thanks for that. I was told that before. I was so confused. You explained that perfectly and answered my question. Okay, I just want to, we have a few more minutes. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Once again, we have a full week of events. Tomorrow's is applying, so specifically and directly to how to apply to become a social worker. We have a policy event where you can learn about the advocacy the chapter is doing around school social work. Then we have a full panel of different folks around licensure. And we also have a CE opportunity. If you guys didn't check that out, I suggest that you should. Do we have any further comments, questions? Feel free to drop it in the chat within the next few minutes, or feel free to unmute and raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you.
And I'll say while we wait for questions, there's two more things I will add is that, remember when you're interviewing them. They are not interviewing you. You have a value and a worth, and you deserve a position that's going to not only make you happy, but financially compensate you for your time at a competitive rate. So when you ask these questions, don't be fearful. Like, remember, you're interviewing, is this the job for me? Are they going to make this work for me? Is this where I want to be? Like, remember, you have the control. And when you ask these questions, they're going to know you're no mess. They're like, oh, they're serious about this. Schools, just like any job, they're going to play games. That's the way it is. But the more you know, the less they can play games. The only other thing I'll add, which we have a session on later this week, is I get a lot of questions about getting your C as a school social worker, which we'll talk later about this week. But I will say the Office of Professions is very specific about what things you need to be doing as an LMSW under the supervision of a C to then qualify as experienced to then apply for your C, assessing, diagnosing, and treating. If your school social work position, which they rarely are not assessing and diagnosing, then you need a lot of documentation to support your application for C so you can get your LCSW. But there'll be a session later this week to kind of talk about that in more detail.
We have some comments. This was so helpful. Thank you so much. Coming into the chat. If anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to raise your hand, drop it in the chat. As Martha said, we do have an incredible panelist on, I believe it's the 13th. That's our Thursday event with Roger Ball and Wendy Castiglia and Gabriella McBride, all representatives across the board. It's going to be an awesome event. We look forward to seeing all of you there. Okay, we'll give it just another minute or so. If we don't have any more questions or comments, we'll give you back some of your time for the evening. But if you do have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We still have some time to address them. You're so welcome. This was an incredible presentation, Martha, just FYI.
I also have a talking problem. So if you're like, Martha, show up and talk, I'm like, where? When?
Hey, we're kin then. Don't put me in a room.
Yeah, literally. I thought it's a problem.
Okay, everyone. We'll give it just another minute. We're getting a lot of thank yous. That was a beautiful presentation. This was so informative. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of that. Everyone's looking forward to the other sessions this week. Nayoka says, I was informed that you can apply for limited certification for school social work while you do work on your license. Can you talk about that, Martha?
Yeah, so you still have to have a job, basically. So that's why I think it's tricky is you can't like apply unless tomorrow Maria says something different. But the last time I talked to them, you can't apply to be a school social worker until you actually been hired. So if a school hires you and you're waiting to take your LMSW test, there is a form that you can fill out, but you need to pass your exam. And then with New York State, you pass your exam and then also have to be licensed, right? Which can take a while. So depending on the district, that might be a yes, that's fine, or that may be a no-go.
Thank you for that.
Facebook, I'm telling you, Facebook, you have to remember for schools is free advertisement. So if they don't have to spend money, they're doing it. And they post employment opportunities, community events, like information, but they'll be posting what jobs they have. They'll be posting before OLAS, like they have like long-term sub. Maybe you want to try out a position and you see that they're looking for a long-term school social work sub because maybe someone's on maternity or paternity leave. That could be a great in for you for that district. They're going to be saying for the next school year and 10 like possible openings. So they're going to post on Facebook first because it's free. They don't have to pay for it.
So the recommendation is to follow some of these schools, specific schools and districts?
Yes, if there's a region that you're looking to work in, if you're not particular at a certain district, you just have like an area, then I'd be following these, or at least stalking. Maybe you don't want to follow, but stalking these Facebook profiles online. Free information. Like I said, read the comments by the community members. It'll give you an insight, which may just be helpful for you to know ahead of time. It's worth knowing how the community views the school, because going in there and having an us versus them, because again, maybe they just raised the school tax, maybe they just had like, I mean, I hate to say this, maybe there was like a big like scandal. You want to know about that. It may not be a no for you for that district, but it may be the people you serve know about it. So you want to know ahead of time. I will say, let me see. What do you think it would take for a social worker to become the chancellor, hypothetically speaking? Are you using chancellor as another phrase for like a leadership and administration? Because I want to make sure we have the same definition.
Feel free to unmute, Nelson.
Yeah, I mean, in New York City, like the person that's head of the DOE is like considered the chancellor. But I think even on a smaller scale, like becoming an assistant principal,
Yeah.
Superintendent, like what would that
What
look
that would
like?
entail? That's a great question. So you have to have, so it's another certification in New York State, but there's different levels. There's a school building leader, district-wide leader, and there might even be another one. However, I'm not sure. There are school social workers that go ahead and get that certificate, right? It's like a usually short, like maybe a year-long program. It does involve an internship, but I'm not sure if you would have to do other classes as prerequisites before you apply. So a lot of times teachers will then go on to get their school building leader, their community-wide leader, but they come from an education background. So the requirements may have specific like teacher or educational staff like term courses that you were supposed to take. So you may have to take some of those courses to then apply for the certification programs, which are usually, like I said, about a year or two, and they do involve an internship. They are different though. There's a school building leader and then like district wide. So you also want to be making sure you're making the right choice for what kind of certification that you want. A lot of people end up doing both, but that's two different programs. Is the school going to pay for you to do it? Are they going to allow you to do your internship with the district? A lot of times, yes, because it's free labor to them. But then I've seen some schools that say, no, like you're not doing your internship within us. We have like, it breaks one of our rules or it's a part of their specific union contract. So then how are you going to manage your full-time job and then do an internship when you're working for a school, which is school hours, right? Like, how do you balance that? So that would be a question.
Got a thumbs up from Nelson. Do we have any additional questions, comments? We have a few more minutes left.
Can I make a comment for Nelson?
Absolutely.
All right, so I have been a payroll sec for 8 years. I have been transitioning into a social work for the last 2 years. My degree finishes on January 7th. So if he wants to become an AP or principal, he can do the course, the one you just mentioned, Ms. Schultz. And he could, building leadership would give him an AP or principal position. He can do, usually if he works in a school, the DOE is all about networking. If you're not principal's friend or the AP's friend, you can work under them and can do your hours there. I have been trying to get my certification in social work. What are the necessities? They needed the workshops, the child abuse recognition. They needed to see that I completed like almost more than 1,000 hours. So it all depends on how many hours you completed. And you could work as a social worker in a New York City public school, but you must work under someone with a license, provisional until you get your permanency.
Mhm.
And the Bronx actually have a lot of social work position. Again, people run from the Bronx. So there are a lot of opportunities in the Bronx to work with kids in terms of social work position. I actually just had a friend who got hired like 2 weeks ago in the Bronx. So,
Excellent.
okay.
Thank
And
you so much, Alana.
I will be tuning in all week.
Good. Also, for those of you who, there was a question on the registration for today, expressing interest in our group, our SIG, that with social workers, which Martha is the chair of, and they will be in contact with you if you express interest for that. We just want to make sure. Once again, I want to thank everybody for tonight. Martha, once again, it was an incredible presentation. I'm sure everyone got a lot of insight and perspective. This was incredible. We'll see you all tomorrow. I'm hoping. Martha, if anything, let me stop this recording. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your time, effort, energy. You know, NASW New York always does.